Let's look at connective tissue and see how that's different from epithelial tissue. The main function of connective tissue is to connect things. It provides the support and structure to most of the organs in the body. Connective tissue helps hold things together, keep things in place, provide layers of protection, and in some cases help to transport materials. In connective tissues, we have fewer cells, and these cells are spaced further apart. And the main function of the tissue depends on the features of the extracellular matrix. For each of the type of connective tissues we look at, we're going to take a look at what cells are present and what the features of the extracellular matrix are and how that contributes to the function of the tissue. One type of connective tissue is loose connective tissue. In loose connective tissue, the cells that create the extracellular matrix are called fibroblasts. The name basically says it all. Fibroblasts secrete fibers. They're going to secrete the collagen and elastic fibers that make up the matrix of the connective tissue. Loose connective tissue typically has a rather random matrix of a network of collagen and elastic fibers. This loose network of fibers provides plenty of room for blood vessels, nerves, and cells to go through the connective tissue to get to different organs of the body. The most common type of loose connective tissue is areolar connective tissue. We find this in all kinds of organs. Almost every organ has a layer of areolar connective tissue that helps keep things together. The connective tissue that we find underneath epithelial tissue is areolar connective tissue that's got the blood vessels and nerves needed to help support that epithelial tissue. In this picture, we can see the nuclei of the fibroblasts, as well as the thick pink collagen fibers and the thinner purple elastic fibers. And here we can even see a white blood cell that was in the tissue. One specialized form of loose connective tissue is adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is what we usually refer to as fat tissue. Adipose tissue contains adipocytes. These are cells that each contain a large droplet of fat. In fact, the droplet of fat inside an adipocyte is so large that it takes up almost all the space in the cell, and everything else, a couple of mitochondria in the nucleus, get all crammed over to the edge of the cell. Adipose tissue is good for providing a layer of insulation and protection, as well as storing fats for energy. In dense connective tissue, we still have fibroblasts that are secreting the matrix, and they're secreting a lot of collagen and elastic fibers. But in dense connective tissue, the fibers are very densely packed, and they really fill in the space in between the cells, so that there's not much room for ground substance. There's also not much room for blood vessels. So without ground substance or blood vessels, there's less exchange of materials going on with the cells in dense connective tissue. This makes dense connective tissue a little bit harder to heal. If you damage your dense connective tissue, you've damaged the fibers that are in there, it's hard for the cells to be able to replace those fibers and heal the tissue. It can be done, it just takes a while. In dense connective tissue, these collagen fibers can either be arranged all in the same direction in parallel, which is what we call regular dense connective tissue, or the bundles can be going in random directions, which we call irregular dense connective tissue. In both cases, all of these collagen bundles provide a lot of strength to the tissue. So dense connective tissue is strong and provides a lot of support. But in regular dense connective tissue, because all those fibers are going the same direction, that strength is only in one direction. It's very strong this way, but not as strong the other direction. We find dense regular connective tissue in areas that experience a lot of force in one direction. This is a common tissue in your tendons and ligaments. Tendons are what are connecting your muscles to the bones, and they're going to experience force in one direction, the direction of that muscle contraction. And ligaments connect bone to bone. In areas of the body that are going to need strength in a lot of different directions, we find the irregular dense connective tissue. There's a layer of irregular dense connective tissue under the epidermis of the skin. That provides a lot of strength in a different direction so that my skin doesn't tear easily no matter which way I pull or push at it. We also find this sort of connective tissue around a lot of organs, forming a fibrous capsule that gives them a layer of strength around the outside. Cartilage and bone are also types of connective tissue. Cartilage and bone both have a stiffer ground substance than we find in other connective tissues, and that allows them to provide a lot of strength to organs. The cells involved in cartilage are called chondrocytes. These chondrocytes create a stiff extracellular matrix. They do secrete a lot of collagen fibers, that's going to give strength to the cartilage, and they also secrete something called chondroitin. Chondroitin helps to make the ground substance stiff or rubbery, rather than soft or gelatinous. Because the extracellular matrix of cartilage is so stiff, it's hard for the cells to exist in that matrix. The cells exist instead in little spaces called lacunae. A lacuna is a little space, and lacunae is plural. Because cartilage has a stiff ground substance, there aren't a lot of blood vessels that go through cartilage. The only way for materials to be exchanged with the chondrocytes in the cartilage is to diffuse through that stiff matrix. And that's a relatively slow process. So this slow exchange of materials means that cartilage can't heal as well when it's damaged. We find cartilage in a lot of different areas of the body where it has slightly different functions. In some areas of the body, the cartilage helps to provide a sort of flexible support to structures, like the cartilage we find in the end of the nose or in the ear gives us a flexible support to those structures. We also find cartilage on the ends of bones, and that cartilage is very smooth and allows for smooth movement of the bones along each other. Moving on to bone, the cells that we find in bone are called osteocytes, whereas chondro refers to cartilage, osteo refers to bone. So our osteocytes are the bone sites. Osteocytes create a very strong, hard extracellular matrix. It does contain collagen and chondroitin, and it also contains calcium compounds that give it its very hard consistency. Bone tissue, because of its hard matrix, has the function of providing support and protection to vital areas of the body. It helps us have the upright shape that we have, as well as protecting important areas like the brain and the thoracic organs. Bone tissue also stores calcium, which is important for nerves and muscles to function. There are two types of bone, compact bone and spongy bone, but we're going to focus on compact bone for now, and we'll see spongy bone when we get to the skeletal system. Compact bone is really interesting to see under the microscope because compact bone is arranged in structures called osteons. The osteocytes create bone in concentric circles. That's what forms these round structures you can see, which are the osteons. The bone matrix is so hard that the osteocytes, the bone cells, can't just be embedded within the matrix. They need a little space to exist in. So they have a little lacunae, or a space, that the cells are actually in. And because the bone matrix is so hard, we can't have diffusion of material through it very easily at all. These osteocytes have to extend little legs or little feet that reach out to contact areas where there's circulation. These little extensions go through tiny canals called canaliculi, and that's what allows each osteon to be able to contact other cells and to reach the blood supply. Osteons tend to have an opening in the middle here called the central canal, and blood vessels run through these canals. The canaliculi, or the little tunnels, extend from the osteocytes to that central canal, allowing the bone cells to have access to circulation so they can get nutrients and get rid of wastes. The last of the connective tissues I want to talk about is blood. Blood is considered a connective tissue. Its main function is not so much to provide structural support, but it definitely provides support in the way that it transports the necessary materials. It transports signals, nutrients, and wastes to and from all the different parts of the body. The cells involved in blood include the erythrocytes, or red blood cells, that are important for carrying oxygen, the leukocytes, or white blood cells, that are an important part of the immune system, and the platelets, which are important for blood clotting. Platelets aren't technically cells, they're really just little fragments of bigger cells, but we do find platelets in the blood. The extracellular matrix of the blood doesn't contain the same sorts of fibers we find in other connective tissues, and the ground substance is very watery. We call it plasma.